She boarded the luxury cruise ship in worn-out shoes and a faded dress. Other passengers stared. Some even whispered behind her back. To them, she was out of place, a poor old woman surrounded by the richest travelers in the world. But what they didn't know was that this quiet lady had a secret, one that would leave everyone in stunned silence. And when the truth came out, every single person who mocked her wished they had treated her differently. Welcome back to our channel, where we share true stories that challenge the way we see people and prove that appearances can be deceiving. Today's story takes place aboard a luxury cruise liner, a floating palace for the wealthy. But hidden among the designer clothes and expensive jewelry was one woman who didn't seem to belong, at least not to the people who judged her too quickly. This is a tale of humility, justice, and a shocking reveal you'll never forget. Margaret was 72 years old when she decided to take a cruise. She'd saved for months to afford a ticket, not because she was desperate for luxury, but because she had always wanted to see the open sea one last time. She arrived at the dock with a small, battered suitcase, a sun hat that had clearly seen better days, and a ticket she had purchased with cash. The moment she stepped aboard, the stares began. Guests in tailored suits and flowing gowns exchanged glances. A group of women at the champagne bar whispered loud enough for her to hear. Who let her on this ship? One of them scoffed. Even some of the crew treated her with distant politeness, assuming she was someone's elderly relative who didn't know the right way to travel. Margaret didn't react. She kept to herself, exploring the decks, staring at the horizon, taking in the scent of salt water and fresh breeze. Every evening, she ate alone at a small table in the dining room. A few kind passengers tried to strike up a conversation, but most ignored her, or worse, laughed quietly when she passed. The worst moment came on the third night. At the captain's dinner, guests dressed in their finest attire. Margaret wore the same floral dress she had worn since boarding. A wealthy couple, seated near her, whispered to their friends, pointing at her frayed sleeves. Laughter followed. She simply sipped her tea and smiled faintly. But on the fifth day, everything changed. The ship docked at a private island for a special excursion. Guests were gathered in the Grand Lounge when the cruise director made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest on board. She is someone who has made extraordinary contributions to global charities and humanitarian causes. Please join me in welcoming Lady Margaret Weatherby. Heads turned. Gasps filled the room. The poor elderly woman in the faded dress stood slowly, smiling kindly at the crowd. The director continued, Lady Weatherby is not only the largest private donor to this cruise company's humanitarian foundation, but she also funded the construction of 3 orphanages and a medical center in underprivileged countries. She has traveled the world quietly, giving without ever asking for recognition. The faces of the mocking passengers turned pale. The women at the champagne bar avoided her gaze. The wealthy couple at the captain's dinner stared at their plates. And the crew members who had treated her coldly now rushed forward, eager to serve her. Margaret didn't gloat. She didn't lecture anyone. She simply thanked the director, smiled at the guests, and said, We never know the full story of the people we meet. It costs nothing to be kind. Her words hung in the air like a quiet wave, washing over the room. From that moment on, everything changed. People invited her to dine with them. Crew members went out of their way to help her. But Margaret remained the same humble, gracious, and more interested in watching the sunset than in being treated like royalty. When the cruise ended, passengers lined up to shake her hand and thank her. Many admitted they had judged her too quickly. She simply smiled and wished them well. As she walked down the dock, her small, battered suitcase in hand, she disappeared into the crowd, just as quietly as she had arrived, leaving behind a lesson that no one on that ship would ever forget. If this story inspired you, remember, wealth is not measured in clothes or jewelry. It's measured in the impact we leave on others. Treat everyone you meet with kindness, because you never know the story they carry. Hit the like button if you believe kindness matters more than appearances. Share this video to remind others never to judge a book by its cover. And subscribe for more true stories that reveal the best in humanity. The ocean was calm, its surface glistening under the soft morning sun. The luxury cruise ship sliced through the waves like a floating palace, carrying hundreds of wealthy passengers dressed in designer clothes and dripping in diamonds. Among them was a small, frail woman named Margaret. She wasn't dressed in silk or satin. Instead, she wore a faded floral dress, sensible shoes, and carried a worn leather handbag that looked decades old. From the moment she stepped aboard, whispers began. "Who let her on here?" murmured a man in a white tuxedo. "She must have won some cheap ticket giveaway," laughed another. Margaret ignored them. She kept to herself, strolling the deck quietly, gazing at the horizon as if it was telling her a secret. At dinner in the grand dining hall, things became worse. The chandeliers sparkled like stars above the polished marble floor. But at Margaret's table, the laughter was sharp, cold, and aimed at her. A woman in a glittering gown leaned over and said loudly, "Darling, the staff's table is at the back, you know." The others erupted into cruel chuckles. Margaret simply smiled politely, her eyes betraying nothing. What no one knew was that Margaret's silence wasn't shyness, it was patience. She had lived a life far grander than any of these passengers could imagine. But revealing the truth now would ruin the game. The days passed. Margaret would read in the lounge, stroll on the deck, and politely decline offers to join group activities. The mockery never stopped, but neither did her gentle smile. Then came the gala, night of formal affair where everyone flaunted their wealth. Margaret arrived late, wearing a deep navy gown that shimmered under the lights. The room fell silent. She no longer looked like the poor old lady they mocked, but like royalty herself. Because sometimes the richest person in the room is the one you least expect.